The first time I truly understood what I was marrying into wasn't during our engagement, or even when Ezra first introduced me to his mother. It was the night before our wedding in a softly lit banquet room filled with candles, clinking forks, and our closest friends raising glasses. The air smelled like rosemary and champagne. I was wearing the blue silk dress Ezra loved, the one with the delicate neckline, and I thought we were about to make a memory. Instead, we made history. Marilyn Whitford stood up from her chair at the head table, deliberately like a judge rising from the bench. Her pearl earrings didn't move, but the silence that followed her stood like a wall. She didn't toast. She didn't smile. She didn't even glance at me as she turned to face her only son. "You're making a mistake, Ezra." That's all she said at first. But her voice carried, crisp, unwavering, across the entire room. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. I saw my college roommate put down her fork. Ezra's godfather blinked like he hadn't heard right. I looked at Ezra hoping he'd say something, anything. But he just stared at her, mouth parted, hands frozen on his linen napkin. Then she turned to me. Finally. Fully. The way a queen might look at a trespasser in her throne room. "This marriage, it's not what our family needs. Not what our family needs." It was a sentence dressed in civility but soaked in venom. Her words were perfectly measured like a courtroom argument, stripped of all emotion, yet designed to cut. "You can still back out," she added as if she were offering me grace. "We'd understand." As if the rest of her family had already voted. As if they'd taken a poll and decided I wasn't fit to carry the Whitford name. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my chest hot. I reached for Ezra under the table and he took my hand, tightly, protectively, but he still hadn't said a word. And in that moment, I realized something bone deep. Marilyn wasn't trying to stop the wedding because she didn't trust me. She was trying to stop the wedding because she did. She knew I saw through her Sunday smiles. Through the little jabs she disguised as jokes. Through the way she'd always insisted on calling me Miss Callow, even after we got engaged. She knew I noticed how she'd scheduled family dinners on nights she knew I taught class, and how she kept the heirloom china locked away when I was around. She saw me for what I was, a disruption. And what terrified her wasn't that Ezra loved me. It was that he might love me more than he feared her. My name is Liana Callow. I'm 29 years old and I've taught ethics and applied philosophy at Asheville Community College for the last 5 years. My students know me as a patient listener, someone who values truth and fairness above all else. But that night, sitting in a room full of Ezra's relatives, I felt anything but heard. I felt like an interloper at my own rehearsal dinner. The worst part, no one stood up for me. Not then. Not when Marilyn left early. Not when Ezra's cousin whispered something to his wife and they both slipped out without saying goodbye. Not even when the music started again and people awkwardly pretended to enjoy their risotto. I smiled through it. Nodded politely. Pretended not to notice. But inside something was cracking open. Quietly, steadily, like the first split in a sheet of ice. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of something much bigger. It was the moment I stopped hoping she'd accept me. And started planning for what I'd do when she didn't. The morning of our wedding I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind like the hush before sunrise. This was a weighted, suffocating kind of silence. The kind that made you check your phone 3 times just to be sure it wasn't broken. No missed calls. No new texts. And none of the usual chatter in the family group thread Ezra had created weeks earlier to organize the wedding details. The thread had been busy for days. Jokes, emojis, seating chart updates. But that morning nothing. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself people were just tired. But when I walked into the kitchen of the Airbnb we'd rented for the bridal party, my maid of honor, Celeste, was already on the phone, face pale, pacing barefoot in her pajamas. She met my eyes and shook her head. "The caterer canceled," she mouthed. I stared at her. "What?" She put the call on speaker. A man's voice crackled through the line. "We were told the event had been postponed indefinitely. We tried to confirm, but we received a formal notice yesterday from someone identifying themselves as Marilyn Whitford. She said she was the paying client." I sat down hard on the edge of the counter. My ears rang. My stomach twisted. "Marilyn." I didn't even have time to process before Celeste's phone buzzed again. "The florist," she said. "You take this one." I answered. The woman on the other end sounded nervous. Apologetic. I'm so sorry, Miss Callow. We received a voicemail from Mrs. Whitford confirming that your ceremony was no longer taking place. She said there had been a family emergency. I closed my eyes. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a full-scale sabotage. Ezra arrived 20 minutes later. His tie was still untied. He looked like he hadn't slept. She's not coming, he said, walking straight to me. She sent out a message last night. Told the rest of the family they'd be complicit if they attended. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. And Liana. His voice broke. She called Uncle Peter. She told him we were rushing into this. That you were unstable. I laughed, sharp and dry. Did she use that word? Ezra nodded. Said you had a complex about legacy. That you'd never fit in with the Whitfords long-term. That it was better to cut losses now. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just got up, walked to the kitchen sink and ran cold water over my wrists. The way my therapist once told me to when my body didn't know how to process rage. I want to marry you, Ezra said behind me quietly. I still do. I turned around slowly. Then let's do it. Without her. Without any of them. He hesitated. And in that hesitation I saw everything I needed to know. Not that he didn't love me. But that part of him still feared her more than he respected me. We got married anyway. The officiant was late. She got lost trying to find the backup venue. Celeste picked wildflowers from the Airbnb's backyard and arranged them in mason jars. Ezra's godfather showed up halfway through the ceremony, awkward and red-faced, muttering something about traffic. There was no music. No first dance. No family. But there were vows. And in those vows, Ezra promised me the kind of life Marilyn had spent the last year convincing him he wasn't allowed to want. A life that didn't center legacy. Or bloodlines. Or expectations. He promised me freedom. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized, is that when someone tries to erase you and you survive, you don't just bounce back. You build something new. Somewhere they can't reach you. And I had just decided where that would be. For the first few weeks after the wedding I tried to move on. I told myself it didn't matter that Ezra's family hadn't come. That Marilyn hadn't even sent a card. That she'd deleted every wedding photo I posted on Facebook. Even the one where Ezra was laughing so hard his eyes disappeared. But deep down it did matter. Because no matter how often Ezra said, "You're my family now," I knew he didn't believe it fully. Not really. He stopped bringing up his mother in conversation, as if not speaking her name could somehow erase what she'd done. I, on the other hand, couldn't stop hearing her voice. That same cold, exact tone she'd used at the rehearsal dinner. You can still back out. I replayed it in the shower. On my way to work. Lying awake beside Ezra at night while he slept like nothing had happened. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that they hadn't just embarrassed me. They had erased me. There were no Whitford family photos of our wedding. No congratulations from Ezra's cousins. No invitation to the annual 4th of July gathering at the lake house. It was as if I didn't exist. And Ezra was too gentle, too conflict avoidant to push back. He wanted peace. I understood that. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's a funeral for your own voice. One morning, about 3 months after the wedding, I opened my email and found a message from an old colleague. She'd been hired by a new liberal arts college in Lisbon, Portugal, and they were expanding their philosophy department. She thought of me immediately. I stared at the screen, rereading the subject line, "Interested in a new chapter?" At first I dismissed it. I wasn't the kind of person who moved to Europe on a whim. I was grounded, responsible, predictable. But then I remembered standing in my wedding dress, watching Ezra's mother dismantle my ceremony from 300 miles away. And something inside me snapped into place. What if I did become that kind of person? What if I stopped asking for a seat at a table that had already decided I didn't belong? That night I brought it up over dinner. "Lisbon," Ezra repeated, blinking. "Like Portugal, Lisbon?" "Yes." He set down his fork. "That's huge." "I know." He was quiet for a long time. "You've never mentioned wanting to move abroad." "I've never had a reason to," I said, meeting his eyes. "But now I do." Ezra didn't argue. He didn't tell me not to go. But he didn't offer to come with me either. And I didn't ask. Because somewhere between Marilyn's boycott and Ezra's silence, I had learned the most painful lesson of all. Sometimes the person you marry isn't strong enough to stand up for you. And sometimes that's the revenge. Letting them watch you leave the life they were too weak to fight for. Lisbon was everything Virginia wasn't. Warm, textured, unapologetically alive. There were no manicured hedges or whispered judgments in linen dining rooms. Just cracked tiles, salt in the air, and the sound of church bells echoing through alleyways that didn't care who your parents were. I moved into a fourth-floor flat with pale yellow shutters and a view of the river. It smelled like sun and soap and old stone. I bought coffee from the same vendor every morning, a woman named Isadora who always added a sugar cube without asking. I taught ethics in English to students who weren't afraid to challenge me. I learned to walk slowly, to listen better, to sleep without dread. For the first time in over a year, I felt like my life was mine. Ezra and I didn't divorce. Not officially. He visited twice, both times looking like a man who didn't recognize the woman he had once promised forever to. We were polite, careful, quiet. He never asked about Marilyn. I never asked why he hadn't come with me. By our second goodbye, we both knew it was over. Not from a single argument but from the slow erosion of everything that holds two people together when the world is unkind. What Ezra couldn't give me, Lisbon did. One afternoon I met someone. His name was Mateo. He was an architect who restored broken buildings for a living. Someone who understood how to hold damage gently without trying to erase the cracks. We started slowly. Coffee, walks, long conversations on park benches with nowhere to be. With Mateo, I never had to prove I belonged. There was no performance, no test, no name I needed to live up to. Just me, as I was. And that was enough. It wasn't until after he met my friends, not my coworkers, my friends, and asked me one evening softly if I ever imagined getting married again, that I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Marilyn. Not of Ezra. Not of becoming someone new. I said yes. Without hesitation. But this time I wasn't planning a wedding for anyone else's approval. This time I was building something sacred, and I wanted the people there to know me for who I was, not for who I failed to become. Still, part of me couldn't forget the silence. The erased wedding. The stolen joy. So I made a decision. I would send one invitation. Just one. To the woman who made sure she wasn't at my first wedding. And this time she'd have a front row seat. The wedding was planned for late September, just as Lisbon begins to shift into its golden season. We kept it small. A garden courtyard hidden behind a bookshop, with lanterns strung across the ivy walls and long tables draped in linen. No assigned seating. No family politics. Just the people who had seen us clearly and chosen to stay. Mateo didn't care about tradition. He only cared about meaning. So instead of a registry, we asked guests to bring handwritten letters, stories, memories, hopes, to be sealed in a box and opened on our 10th anniversary. I found a Portuguese dressmaker who worked from a sunlit attic in Alfama. She didn't ask about my theme or my colors. She asked about my story. What I'd learned. What I wanted to feel walking down the aisle. I told her, whole. And she made me a dress that felt like breath, weightless and real and quietly defiant. No corset. No veil. Just silken skin and light. 3 weeks before the wedding, I sat at my desk with a single envelope. No return address. No note inside. Just the formal embossed invitation, the same one we'd sent to every guest. Except this one was addressed in my own handwriting to Mrs. Marilyn Whitford, Arlington, Virginia, United States. I didn't include a message. No explanation. No plea. Just the time, the date, the location, and a line that read, dress code, whatever lets you sleep at night. I sealed the envelope and stared at it for a long time before placing it in the outgoing international mail. Mateo didn't ask who it was for. He just kissed my temple and said, "You're very brave." But I wasn't sending it for revenge. Not exactly. I was sending it because I wanted her to know that the thing she tried to erase had not only survived. It had become something more beautiful than she could imagine. And I wanted her to see it, not through bitterness or rage, but through the one thing she couldn't fake. Absence. The day of the wedding arrived quietly. No chaos. No panicked phone calls. No vendors bailing at the last minute. Just the soft clatter of breakfast dishes, the low hum of music drifting from the courtyard, and the rustle of my dress as I stepped onto the tiled floor barefoot to open the window. Outside, the morning air smelled like lavender and bread. My hair wasn't professionally styled. I'd done it myself, pulled back in soft waves, pinned with tiny pearl clips I'd found at a flea market the week before. I didn't wear heels. I didn't carry a bouquet. I didn't walk down the aisle. I entered from the side garden, sunlight pouring through the ivy, and Matteo was already standing there. In his linen suit, sleeves rolled slightly, eyes warm and steady, as if there had never been a version of his life without me in it. The ceremony was simple. Short vows. A few tears. Laughter from someone in the back when Matteo accidentally said, teammate, instead of partner for life. But what I remember most was the chair. The one near the front. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't mentioned. But I had asked the coordinator to set it anyway. A single, elegant wooden chair with a navy cushion, placed in the second row, far enough away to be out of reach but close enough to notice. It stayed empty. No surprise. There was no Marilyn. No dramatic entrance. No tearful apology. No attempt to make peace. Just a blank seat where once there had been a woman determined to erase me. At first I thought I'd feel disappointed. Like I'd somehow missed my moment. Like the whole thing had been wasted if she didn't come to witness it. But standing there holding Matteo's hands, hearing my own voice say, I do, with absolute clarity, I realized something. The seat wasn't for her. It was for me. It was proof that I no longer needed anyone's permission to belong to my own life. That chair was the space where her judgment used to live. And it would remain unoccupied, not because she couldn't come, but because she no longer mattered. The invitation came back a week after the wedding. I found it in my mailbox, the envelope slightly smudged from travel, the seal broken and resealed with a strip of office tape. On the back, someone had scrawled in neat slanted handwriting. This feels beneath you. MW. No signature. No congratulations. Not even a denial. Just those 5 words. 5 words that told me everything I needed to know. She had opened it. He had seen it. She had understood exactly what it was. And it rattled her. I stood in the hallway with the envelope in my hand for a long time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. Because for all her control, all her silence, all her passive-aggressive disapproval, she had finally said something true. It was beneath me. All of it. The begging for her approval. The years spent trying to decode her expressions at family dinners. The bending, softening, shrinking of myself to fit inside a legacy I never asked to be part of. Marilyn had always believed the Whitford name was something to be protected. Preserved. Held at arm's length from outsiders like me. But what she never understood was that her precious legacy wasn't strong enough to survive honesty. She could orchestrate boycotts, but she couldn't stop love from taking root somewhere else. Somewhere stronger. Somewhere warmer. Matteo and I spent our wedding night on a rooftop, wrapped in blankets and candlelight, reading the letters our guests had written us. One was from my old professor in North Carolina. She wrote, "You are the most quietly powerful person I've ever met." Another from Celeste, "You rebuilt your life like a cathedral. No apologies, no blueprint, just faith in the foundation." I cried when I read that one. Not because I was sad, but because I finally believed it was true. I didn't need Marilyn to come to the wedding. Her absence was the clearest confession she could ever give. And I no longer needed to translate her silence into something softer than it was. It's been a year since the second wedding. Lisbon still feels like home. The mornings are slower now. Matteo and I start each day with strong coffee and open windows, letting the breeze carry in the sound of the city waking up. Sometimes I catch myself smiling for no reason. Other times I think about the woman I used to be, the one who sat silent at her own rehearsal dinner while a cold voice tried to erase her. She would never have imagined this version of her life. Not in a million years. Not the love. Not the freedom. Not the peace that comes from knowing you don't need to win someone over to prove your worth. Ezra wrote me once. A short email. Polite. Careful. He said he'd seen a photo from the wedding. A mutual friend had posted something. He wrote, "You look happy. I hope you are." I never responded. Not because I was bitter. But because I had already said everything I needed to say, not in words but in the life I built without them. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it all happened. If I wish I'd handled things differently. If I would have been happier had Marilyn just accepted me. And maybe once upon a time I would have said yes. But now. Now I understand something she never did. You don't inherit legacy. You build it. Not through bloodlines. Not through names. But through choices. And I chose love that didn't shrink me. I chose peace that wasn't conditional. I chose a second wedding with a chair left empty, not out of spite, but as a monument to the silence I finally stopped filling with apologies. And that is the legacy I carry forward. One that will never need permission to exist.